Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became a Saiyan warrior. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The first thing to return was the ache. It was a deep, thrumming pain that started in the back of his skull and radiated down his spine, a dull counterpoint to the sharp sting in his right arm. Izuku Midoriya groaned, the sound swallowed by an unfamiliar fabric against his lips. He tried to shift, but his limbs felt like lead, weighed down by an exhaustion so profound it felt more like a geological feature than a physical state. He pried his eyes open. The world swam into focus in blurry, disjointed shapes. He wasn't in his dorm room. He wasn't at the UE training grounds. He was lying on a plush, king-size bed, the sheets a heavy, cloying silk that felt alien against his skin. The room was vast and steeped in shadow, the only light source a soft, indirect glow from recessed fixtures in the ceiling. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookcases filled with leather-bound volumes he couldn't read, a polished obsidian desk that looked large enough to host a state dinner. It was a chamber of immense, suffocating opulence. It smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and something else, something sterile and cold, like a hospital hidden beneath a palace. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through the fog in his mind. Where am I? He sat up, his head spinning. The ache intensified, and he pressed the heel of his palm against his temple. He was no longer in his gamma costume. The sturdy, familiar fabric was gone, replaced by a simple, perfectly tailored black suit. A crisp white shirt, a slim black tie, trousers that felt unnervingly expensive. He felt like he was playing dress-up for a funeral. His own, perhaps. Think, Izuku. He closed his eyes, pushing past the pain. The last thing he remembered. Ground Gamma. Solo training. He'd been practicing a new application of Black Whip, trying to create finer, more controlled tendrils for non-lethal captures. He remembered the rustle of leaves behind him, a scent like ozone and burnt sugar. He'd turned, instinct screaming, but there was nothing there. Just a shimmer in the air, a distortion like heat haze. Then, a sharp, piercing pain in his neck, and the world had dissolved into blackness. A warp quirk. Kurogyri? No, the sensation had been different. Faster. Silent. His eyes snapped open, scanning the room for exits. There was one large, imposing door of the same dark wood as the walls. No visible handle. No lock. To his left, a wall of what looked like one-way glass, currently as black and reflective as a starless night sky. He slid off the bed, his bare feet sinking into a thick, blood-red rug. His body felt sluggish, his connection to one for all a distant thrum instead of its usual crackling fire. He focused, drawing on the power. Green lightning flickered weakly around his fist, sputtering like a dying ember. It was there, but muted, suppressed. A drug? A quirk? They took my shoes, was the absurdly mundane thought that cut through his panic. And my phone. And my utility belt. He was unarmed, weakened, and trapped. A prisoner. A low hum filled the room, and the black wall opposite the bed flickered to life. It wasn't glass, it was a screen. An enormous one. For a moment, it showed only static, a churning sea of gray and white. Then, the static resolved into an image, a close-up of a face hidden behind a nightmarish latticework of life support tubing. The only visible features were a lipless mouth stretched into a calm, almost pleasant smile, and eyes that were nothing more than dark, knowing pits. All for one. Izuku stumbled back, every muscle in his body screaming to run, to fight, to do anything. The green lightning around his hand died completely, smothered by the sheer weight of the villain's presence, even through a screen. Good morning, Izuku Midoriya, the voice purred, a synthetic baritone that was impossibly smooth, yet carried the chilling resonance of a tomb. Or is it afternoon? I confess I lose track of time. I do hope you slept well. The sedative was calibrated to leave you rested, not groggy. What? What do you want? Izuku's voice was a raw croak. He forced himself to stand straight, to channel the image of All Might, a beacon against the suffocating darkness. All for One's smile seemed to widen. Direct. I appreciate that. It's a quality my protégé, Tamura, so often lacks. He favors theatrics. But you have a mind for efficiency. That is precisely what I want, young man. Your mind. Izuku's blood ran cold. I will never help you. The words were automatic, the hero's creed etched into his very soul. Oh, I believe you will, All For One said, his tone shifting from pleasant to paternal, a father correcting a naive child. You see, I have followed your progress with great interest. Your analysis, your strategy, your uncanny ability to turn chaos into a calculated victory. That talent is wasted on the so-called heroes. They are blunt instruments, reacting to fires. I am interested in the man who can predict where the lightning will strike and build the pyre to welcome it. I want a leader. A true successor. You have Shigaraki, Izuku spat, his defiance a flimsy shield. A sound that might have been a chuckle crackled through the speakers. Tamura has passion. He has a magnificent capacity for destruction. He is a symbol, a force of nature. But he is not a general. He is a rabid dog, and I need a shepherd. You, Izuku Midoriya, will be that shepherd. Never. The word was stronger this time. He took a step forward, his fists clenched. Let me go. Whatever you're planning, it won't work. The heroes will find me. All Might will. All Might, All For One interrupted, the name dripping with disdain, is, at this very moment, mourning you. The floor seemed to drop out from under Izuku. What? A tragic accident at Ground Gamma, the villain explained, his voice oozing false sympathy. A miscalculation during a powerful new move. There was very little left to find, a few scorched scraps of your costume, a crater in the earth. So sad. A promising young hero, snuffed out before his prime. The world will grieve. Your little friends at Yui will cry. Your mother will be heartbroken. But they will all move on, because Izuku Midoriya is dead. The air left Izuku's lungs in a silent rush. It was a perfect trap. No one was coming for him because no one knew he was alive. He was a ghost in a black suit, standing in a cage built by the devil himself. You see the predicament, All For One continued softly. There is no exit. No rescue. There is only the choice I place before you. A choice between two paths. Izuku's mind raced, searching for an angle, a weakness. One for All felt distant, but maybe if he could just get one good smash. Don't even consider it, AFO's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp as glass. The room is reinforced to withstand your full power. Furthermore, any attempt at violence will have consequences. Which brings us to the heart of our discussion. The image on the screen changed. It was a small, white room. A child's room. There was a bed with a simple blue blanket, a small table with a set of crayons, and a single, colorful drawing taped to the wall, a lopsided cat with a giant smile. Sitting on the edge of the bed, her small legs dangling, was a little girl with snow-white hair and a single, tiny horn peeking out from her fringe. Eri, Izuku's breath hitched. A sound, half sob, half gasp, tore from his throat. He fell to his knees, his eyes locked on the screen. She was sleeping, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, her expression peaceful. She looked safe. Cared for. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. She is quite remarkable, All For One mused. Her quirk, the potential is staggering. A key to undoing any mistake. A way to restore what was lost. An ultimate failsafe. A prize beyond measure. You monster, Izuku whispered, tears blurring his vision. Let her go. Take me. Do whatever you want to me, just let her go. An admirable, if predictable, sentiment, AFO said. But you are misunderstanding the nature of this transaction. You are not the hostage, young man. You are the ransom. She is the leverage. As if on cue, a dark metal collar around Eri's neck on the screen lit up with a faint blue light. That device is connected to her nervous system, AFO explained, his voice chillingly clinical. With a simple command, I can send a signal. It can deliver anything from a mild discomfort to a level of agony that would shatter an adult's mind. Or, of course, it can deliver a current sufficient to stop her heart instantly. It is very precise. No. Izuku begged, scrambling closer to the screen, his hands pressing against the cold, unyielding surface. Please don't. Don't hurt her. I don't want to hurt her, Izuku. I want to protect her. I want to see her happy and healthy. Her well-being is entirely in your hands. The villain paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Allow me to demonstrate your control over the situation. On the screen, the blue light on the collar flashed red. Eri's peaceful sleep was shattered. Her eyes flew open, wide with shock and pain. Her body went rigid, a silent scream distorting her small face. A choked, gurgling sound escaped her lips as her back arched unnaturally. It lasted only a second. Just one eternal second. Then the light vanished. Eri slumped forward, gasping, her body trembling with residual tremors. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't cry out. She didn't make a sound. She just curled into a ball, shaking, her expression one of vacant, learned terror. It was the look he remembered from the Shy Hasaikai raid. The look of a child who knew that screaming did no good. The sound that ripped from Izuku's own throat was inhuman. A raw, ragged scream of pure anguish. He collapsed completely, his forehead hitting the floor as violent, racking sobs shook his entire frame. It wasn't just the sight of her pain, it was the sound. That tiny, strangled gasp would be burned into his memory forever. The pain has subsided, All for One said, his voice a calm poison amidst Izuku's despair. As you can see, she is unharmed. For now. So, let us return to your choice. Path 1, you refuse my offer. You fight, you resist, and Eri pays the price for your heroic folly. I will keep her alive, of course. Her quirk is too valuable to discard, but her life will be an endless symphony of pain, each crescendo a direct result of your defiance. And you will watch, Izuku vomited. A thin stream of bile splattered onto the luxurious rug, the acrid smell filling his nostrils. He couldn't stop shaking. His mind, his analytical, hopeful mind, was a maelstrom of horror and helplessness. There was no way out. No plus-ultra solution. Or, the villain continued, his voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial whisper, there is path 2. You accept your new role. You become the strategic commander of the League of Villains. You will use that brilliant mind of yours to elevate them, to shape them from a band of chaotic misfits into a precise and effective army. You will plan their operations. You will secure their victories. You will bring order to their chaos. You will be my shepherd. He paused. The screen split. On one side, the live feed of Eri, now rocking back and forth silently. On the other, the lipless smile of All for One. For every success, Eri will be rewarded. A new toy. A favorite meal. A kind word. Her life will be as comfortable and pleasant as a prisoner's can be. For every failure, for every act of defiance or sabotage, she will be reminded of the consequences. The choice is yours, Izuku Midoriya. Lead my villains to glory, and the child remains safe. Cling to your broken morals, and she suffers for them. What is the life of one innocent girl worth to you? Is it worth more than your precious hero's code? The question hung in the air, a monstrous, impossible weight. Every fiber of his being screamed no. He was Deku. He was the successor to All Might. He saved people. That was who he was, but the image of Eri's silent agony was a brand on his soul. He could not, would not, let that happen again. If her safety was bought with his damnation, then it was a price he had to pay. The fight went out of him. The fire of One for All, the spirit of heroism, all of it was extinguished, doused by the cold, brutal reality of his choice. There was no choice at all. He pushed himself up, his limbs trembling. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, finding the camera. The tears had stopped. All that remained was a vast, empty wasteland where his hope used to be. I'll do it, he said, his voice a dead, lifeless thing. I accept. The lipless mouth on the screen stretched into a triumphant grin. Excellent. I knew you had a pragmatic mind. I am so very proud. The screen went black. A moment later, the imposing wooden door slid open with a silent, hydraulic hiss, revealing a long, sterile white corridor. Standing in the doorway was a figure made of swirling purple-black mist, his yellow eyes glowing with detached professionalism. Kurojiiri, Izuku breathed. Commander Midoriya, the warped villain said, his voice as smooth as polished stone. He gestured down the hall. The others are waiting. Master has requested your presence in the command center, Commander Midoriya. The name felt like a physical blow. He was no longer Deku. He was no longer Izuku. He was a title. A role. A monster in a black suit. Numbly, he walked. He followed the silent mist man down the corridor, his expensive suit feeling like a shroud, his bare feet cold against the polished concrete floor. The architecture was a jarring mix of brutalist concrete and bleeding-edge technology. Wires and conduits ran along the ceiling like metallic vines, and sealed metal doors hissed open as they approached, then sealed shut behind them. It was less a hideout and more a high-tech bunker, a testament to the scope of AFO's resources. Finally, they stopped before a set of massive, double-wide steel doors. Kurojiru paused, his misty form turning slightly. A word of advice, Commander. The League is a delicate ecosystem of volatile personalities. Master's authority is absolute, but your appointment will be disruptive. Tread carefully. Izuku said nothing. He had no words left. The doors slid open, and he was hit by a wave of sound and sensation. The room beyond was enormous, a circular command hub dominated by a holographic display table at its center. Banks of computers and monitors lined the curved walls, displaying news feeds, security camera footage, and complex data streams. The air smelled of stale cigarette smoke, ozone, and the cloying sweetness of blood. And then he saw them, the League of Villains. His new team. Tamura Shigaraki was there, perched on a high stool, scratching furiously at his neck, his red eyes blazing with an incandescent hatred that was aimed directly at Izuku. The sound of his nails scraping raw skin was a dissonant screech in the tense silence. Himiko Toga sat cross-legged on a worn-out sofa, a knife held loosely in her hand. When she saw Izuku, her golden eyes widened, and a slow, ecstatic smile spread across her face, revealing her sharp canines. It was a look of pure, predatory delight. Dabi leaned against a far wall, arms crossed, his stapled skin a gruesome tapestry. He wasn't looking at Izuku directly, but Izuku could feel the weight of his cold, turquoise gaze assessing him, dissecting him. Of all of them, his silence was the most unnerving. Spinner was fidgeting with the swords on his back, his reptilian eyes wide with confusion. Twice was rocking back and forth, muttering to himself, "It's the hero kid. Kill him now. He looks so sad. I'll do it myself." Mr. Compress stood calmly by the holographic table, one hand on his hip, an unreadable mask hiding his expression. A deep, commanding voice, all for one's voice, boomed from hidden speakers around the room, making the floor vibrate. "League of Villains, behold your new strategic commander." The tension in the room snapped. "What?" Shigaraki shrieked, leaping from his stool. His scratching intensified, flakes of dry skin dusting his black shirt. "Sensei, you can't be serious. This puke, this all-might wannabe, he's our enemy. I will not be commanded by a hero. You will learn from him, Tamura," AFO's voice replied, patient but laced with unbreakable steel. "You have the will. He has the mind. Observe him. Emulate him. Absorb his methods. This is not a punishment, it is an education. I don't need an education from a pathetic yui brat." Shigaraki's voice cracked with pure, childish fury. He pointed a trembling, four-fingered hand at Izuku. "I am your successor. I am the one who will tear down this rotten society. I'll kill him. I'll decay him to dust right here and now." With a scream of rage, Shigaraki lunged. He was fast, his movements erratic and deadly. Izuku's combat instincts, buried under layers of shock and despair, flared to life. He braced himself, one for all flickering weakly, preparing to dodge, to counter, to survive. He never got the chance. A shadow fell over the room. A titanic hand, larger than Izuku's entire torso, shot out from a darkened alcove. It wasn't aimed at Izuku. It slammed into Shigaraki, not with crushing force, but with an irresistible, dismissive power, pinning him against the concrete wall with a sickening thud. The hand belonged to a giant, a mountain of muscle with a jaw like a gravestone. Gigantomachia, Mestastairs. Or dear. The giant rumbled, his voice a tectonic groan. Shigaraki struggled, his limbs flailing uselessly against the giant's grip. Let me go. Makia! He's the enemy! My will is absolute, Tamura, all for one's voice echoed, cold and final. You will stand down. You will listen. And you will obey, your new commander. Makia grunted and released him. Shigaraki slid down the wall, gasping for air, his body trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. He shot Izuku a look of such profound, murderous hatred that it was a physical force. It promised a slow, painful death the moment AFO's gaze was turned. The room was silent again, save for twice frantic whispering. Toga, however, seemed to find the whole situation delightful. She bounced off the sofa and skipped over to Izuku, her movements unnervingly fluid. She stopped inches from him, tilting her head and inhaling deeply, like she was savoring a fine wine. Izuku-kun, she chirped, her voice a sing-song of glee. You look so good in black. So sad. So broken. I love it. Your face, it's all empty. Are you going to be a bad boy for us now? Will you bleed for us? Can I have some? She giggled, a wild, unhinged sound that made the hairs on Izuku's arms stand up. He didn't respond. He couldn't. He just stared into the abyss of her madness, feeling nothing. Leave him be, Toga, a low voice drawled from the corner. Dabi had finally pushed himself off the wall. He walked forward slowly, his long coat swishing around his ankles. His turquoise eyes scanned Izuku from head to toe, lingering on the expensive suit and the hollow expression. The master's new pet looks a little fragile. He stopped a few feet away, a faint wisp of smoke curling from his staples. So, you're in charge now. The Goody Two-Shoes hero is going to tell us how to be better villains. This should be entertaining. His tone was thick with sarcasm, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and deeply suspicious. He didn't believe the act. He was looking for the angle, the trick. He was looking for the hero hiding inside the suit. Izuku met his gaze, and for a fleeting moment, the emptiness within him was filled with a single, burning thought. I have to make them believe it. His life didn't matter. But Ares did. His survival, and hers, depended on him playing this role convincingly. He had to become the monster they wanted him to be. He stood taller, forcing the tremor from his limbs. He let a cold, detached mask fall over his features, mirroring the emptiness he felt inside. He looked from Dabi's suspicious sneer to Shigaraki's murderous glare, to Toga's ecstatic grin. He saw the confusion in Spinner's eyes and the chaos in Twice. These were not teammates. They were wolves, and all for one had just made him their shepherd. The synthesized voice of their jailer filled the room one last time, sealing his fate. Your first assignment, Commander, will be a test of your resolve. A chance to prove your worth to your new comrades, and your loyalty to our cause. A holographic map materialized on the central table, showing the layout of a high-tech corporate facility. This is the Itokawa Research Institute. They are developing next-generation communication jammers for the pro-heroes. You will acquire that technology for us. Plan the mission. Lead them. Do not disappoint me. The speakers went silent. The holographic map shimmered, waiting for its commander. Izuku Midoriya stood in the heart of the League of Villains' den, the hostile faces of society's most wanted criminals staring at him. He could feel the weight of their hatred, their suspicion, their madness. He could feel the cold steel of the cage that had snapped shut around him. On the other side of that cage, in a place he couldn't reach, was a little girl whose life depended on him becoming everything he had sworn to destroy. He looked at the hostile faces, then at the glowing map. His first order as a villain. The first step on a path to damnation. The hope didn't just drain away. It was ripped out, leaving a raw, gaping wound. He was alone. Utterly and completely alone. And in the chilling silence of the command center, the shepherd took his first, heavy step toward his flock of wolves. The days that followed blurred into a single, monotonous stretch of time, measured not by the rising or setting of a sun he never saw, but by the hum of servers and the faint, ever-present scent of antiseptic that failed to mask the base's underlying decay. Izuku Midoriya, the ghost in the black suit, had carved out a small territory for himself at a secondary console in the corner of the command hub. It was his island of cold, hard logic in an ocean of madness. he worked. That was all he did. He slept on a cot in a small, featureless room identical to the one where he had first awoken, ate nutrient paste that tasted like cardboard and despair, and spent every waking moment hunched over the console, his new notebooks filling with a terrifying new kind of analysis. The familiar, frantic scrawl was still his, but the subject matter was a perversion of everything he had once stood for. He charted hero patrol routes not to find inspiration, but to identify vulnerabilities. He analyzed quirk registrations not to admire their potential, but to calculate their weaknesses. He studied architectural blueprints of secure facilities, seeing them not as bastions of progress, but as puzzles to be unlocked, their security systems mere obstacles to be dismantled. Each stroke of his pen felt like a betrayal. Each completed page felt like another spadeful of dirt on the grave of the hero named Deku. The League gave him a wide berth. They seemed unsure of what to make of this silent, intense figure who had been thrust upon them. Toga would sometimes watch him for hours, a dreamy, unsettling smile on her face, as if she were observing a fascinating new species of predator. Spinner and Mr. Compress were professionally distant, awaiting orders. Twice kept his distance, his dual monologues a constant, frantic background noise. And then there were the two poles of his new, nightmarish reality, Dabi and Shigaraki. Dabi was a phantom, leaning against walls just at the edge of Izuku's peripheral vision. He never spoke to him directly, but Izuku could feel the weight of his stare, cold and analytical. It was the gaze of a man trying to solve a riddle. Dabi wasn't looking at a commander. He was looking at a lie, and he was determined to find the seams. Shigaraki was the opposite. He was a constant, simmering presence of pure animosity. He would pace the command hub like a caged animal, the scritch-scratch of his nails on his raw neck a sound that grated on Izuku's already frayed nerves. Every time Izuku looked up from his console, Shigaraki's burning red eyes were there, promising disintegration. He was a bomb waiting for a fuse, and Izuku knew that fuse was him. After 3 days of intensive analysis, the plan was ready. Izuku stood from his console, the joints in his back popping in protest. He walked to the central holographic table, his movements stiff and deliberate. "Kurogiri," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Assemble them." The swirling mist of the warp villain nodded, and within minutes, the others had gathered. Shigaraki slumped onto his usual stool, radiating contempt. Toga sat on the floor, sharpening a knife on her boot. Dabi remained by the far wall, a pillar of cynical observation. Izuku tapped a command into the table's interface. A three-dimensional, shimmering blueprint of the Itokawa Research Institute materialized in the air above it. "The objective," Izuku began, his voice the detached monotone he had carefully cultivated, "is the theft of a prototype communications jammer from the primary research lab on sublevel 3. The device is designated Project Nightingale. Our window of opportunity is tonight, between 0200 and 0400 hours. He zoomed in on the facility, highlighting power conduits and ventilation shafts in red. "The plan is not a frontal assault. It is a stealth infiltration based on precision, timing, and misdirection. We will enter and exit with minimal engagement and 0 casualties." Shigaraki let out a dry, rasping laugh. "0 casualties? Are we villains or are we interior decorators? This is pathetic. We should just walk in the front door and decay anyone who gets in our way." A frontal assault would trigger a full-scale hero response in under 3 minutes, Izuku countered without looking at him, his gaze fixed on the hologram. "The closest hero agency is Endeavor's. Their average response time to a high-threat alert at this location is 2 minutes and 47 seconds. We would be overwhelmed before we even reach sublevel 1. Your plan is strategically unsound and guarantees failure." He didn't say it with anger, but with the cold, irrefutable finality of a mathematical proof. Shigaraki's jaw tightened, his scratching becoming more frantic. Izuku continued, his finger tracing a path through the holographic building. "Phase 1 insertion. Kurogiri will warp a small team to this maintenance access point on the roof at 0210 hours. The team will consist of Toga, Compress, and Dabi." Toga looked up, her eyes bright. "Ooh, fun! Will there be cute heroes inside?" "Your role is infiltration, not combat," Izuku stated flatly. "You will use the blood of a maintenance worker I have identified, his schedule, blood type, and personal information are in your briefing packet. To gain access to the primary server room, Compress, you will be responsible for neutralizing any lone security personnel we encounter. Containment only. Dobby, you will use precise thermal control to overload a secondary power junction here, he pointed, at exactly 0235. This will create a false alarm on the opposite side of the facility, drawing the main security patrol away from our insertion path. Dobby pushed himself off the wall, a flicker of interest in his turquoise eyes. Precise thermal control? You've done your homework. What if the guards don't follow their patrol routes? They will, Izuku said. The Institute's security chief is a man named Kenji Tanaka. Ex-military. His protocols are rigid and predictable. A power surge in a non-critical wing will be treated as an equipment malfunction, not a threat. He will send his primary team to investigate, following protocol to the letter. I have analyzed his record for the last 5 years. He has never deviated. He then turned his gaze, for the first time, to Shigaraki. Phase 2, the objective. While the primary team creates the diversion, Shigaraki and Twice will be warped by Kurogyri into this secure IT closet adjacent to the main lab. Twice, you will create a single clone of Shigaraki. Twice jumped up. 1 clone? Just 1? I can make 1,000,000. A whole army of decay boys. 1 is all that is required, Izuku said, his patience a thin, brittle shell. The clone will access the lab's security console and initiate a system diagnostic. It's a low-level command that won't trigger alarms, but will create a digital backdoor. The real Shigaraki will then use that backdoor to disable the magnetic locks on the prototype's containment unit from this terminal here. He highlighted a console in the IT closet. It must be done quietly, no decaying the entire console. You will use the access codes provided. The moment the locks are disengaged, Compress will secure the Nightingale prototype, Kurogyri will extract all teams, and we will be gone. Total operational time, 15 minutes. He finished, the hologram shimmering in the silence. The plan was intricate, a clockwork mechanism of interlocking parts. It was designed to be clean, surgical, heroic, in its own twisted way. So we just sneak around like rats? Shigaraki hissed, his voice dripping with venom. No noise? No fun? No message to send to all the fake heroes out there? This is a coward's plan, Sensei, he yelled at the ceiling. All for One's voice did not respond. The silence was his answer. Shigaraki was to obey. This is a plan that guarantees success, Izuku said, his voice dropping even lower, colder. Success is the only variable that matters. The mission proceeds as outlined. Study your roles. We move in 2 hours. He turned and walked back to his console without another word, leaving the rest of them to simmer in the tension. He could feel Shigaraki's hatred like a physical heat on his back. He knew he had won the strategic argument, but in doing so, he had pushed the unstable villain closer to the edge. It was a calculated risk. A risk he had to take to keep the mission clean. A risk, he would soon learn, that he had horribly misjudged. 2 hours later, Izuku sat alone in the silent command hub, the room's main lights dimmed. The only illumination came from the dozen monitors in front of him, displaying schematics, biometric readings from the League members, and live feeds from compromised security cameras inside the Itokawa Institute. He was the eye in the sky, a disembodied voice connected to his team by encrypted communicators. The name they used for him, the one he had chosen for himself, felt like acid on his tongue. Shepherd to all units. Phase 1 begins now. Kurogyri, execute insertion. Understood, Kurogyri's smooth voice replied from beside the console. A swirling vortex of purple-black mist opened in the center of the room, and then closed. On one of Izuku's monitors, a blip appeared on the roof of the institute. The infiltration team was in Viper status, Izuku said, using the call sign he'd assigned Toga. So sneaky. Her cheerful voice whispered in his ear. I'm in the vents. It smells like dusty old men in here. I love it. Izuku ignored the commentary. Phoenix report. A beat of silence, then Dabi's low drawl. In position at the junction box. This place is cheap. Barely insulated wiring. Your timing for the surge is generous. The clock on the main screen ticked past 0230. The first part of the plan unfolded with terrifying perfection. Toga, disguised as the portly, middle-aged maintenance worker, was buzzed through a security door. Mr. Compress, moving with the silent grace of a stage magician, intercepted a lone guard on his coffee break, and the man vanished with a soft pop into a tiny blue marble that Compress pocketed. Shepard, this is Phoenix. Preparing to create the diversion on your mark. Stand by, Izuku breathed, his eyes darting between 3 different camera feeds. He watched the main security patrol round a corner, their flashlights cutting lazy arcs in the dim corridor. They were exactly where they were supposed to be, exactly when they were supposed to be there. Mark. On screen, a shower of sparks erupted from a panel on the far side of the sublevel. Alarms blared, but they were localized, a shrill, contained cry. Power surge detected in Sector 7B, a computerized voice announced over the facility's comms. Izuku watched the patrol leader, Tanaka's second-in-command, tap his earpiece. Control, this is Bravo Team. We have a power surge in 7B. Moving to investigate. They turned, their movements efficient and predictable, heading away from the core labs. Away from the insertion point for Phase 2. A knot of tension in Izuku's stomach loosened slightly. It was working. Shepard to all units. Diversion is successful. Kurogyri, insert Phase 2 team. Now, another warp gate shimmered into existence, and vanished in the command hub. 2 new biometric signals appeared on Izuku's map, inside the IT closet adjacent to the lab. Decay, Jester, you are in position, Izuku said, using the call signs for Shigaraki and Twice. Jester, create the clone. Decay, stand by at the terminal. 1 me, coming right up. Twice voice chirped. He's going to mess it up. A moment later, a third signal appeared in the closet. The clone. Now came the delicate part. The part that relied on Shigaraki's restraint. Decay clone, initiate the diagnostic, Izuku ordered. There was no response. Decay clone, do you copy? Initiate the system diagnostic. Silence. Then, Shigaraki's real voice, raw and grating, crackled over the comm. This is taking too long. It's boring. Izuku's blood ran cold. Stick to the plan, Decay. This is not a debate. I'm the one who should be giving the orders. Shigaraki snarled. You sit there in your safe little room, playing with your toys. We're the ones taking the risks? I think it's time for some real fun. Before Izuku could respond, a horrifying sound filled his headset, the screech of metal and the catastrophic crunch of failing electronics. On the camera feed from the corridor outside the IT closet, the heavy steel door bowed outwards, then blasted off its hinges, propelled by a wave of gray dust. Shigaraki had not used the console. He hadn't bothered with the clone, or the codes. He had simply placed all 5 fingers on the wall separating the closet from the lab and activated his quirk. The entire wall dissolved into a cloud of cascading powder. Every alarm in the facility shrieked to life. Red lights bathed the corridors in a hellish glow. A klaxon began to sound, a deep, resonant whoop 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 that signaled a full-scale intruder alert. Catastrophic structural failure and containment breach detected in Lab C4. The facility's AI screamed. All units converge. Hero Link protocol initiated. Shigaraki, you fool! Izuku roared into his comm, his cold persona shattered. Shigaraki's cackling was his only reply. See? Much faster. Now this is a real villain attack. The mission was no longer an infiltration. It was a chaotic, desperate scramble. On his tactical map, Izuku watched in horror as icons representing the Institute's security teams changed direction, swarming their position. Worse, a new set of icons appeared on the edge of the map, flashing red and moving fast. Pro-heroes. They'd be there in less than 3 minutes. Shepard, what are your orders? Mr. Compress's voice was tense but steady. We're totally screwed. This is awesome. Twice yelled. The heroes are coming. Toga sang, her voice filled with manic glee. Izuku's mind raced, 1,000 variables colliding at once. His plan, his beautiful, clean, non-lethal plan, was in ashes. In its place was a death trap of his own making. If they were captured, if they failed, AFO's promise echoed in his mind. The image of Ares' face, contorted in silent agony, flashed behind his eyes. Failure is not an option. That single, terrible thought cut through the panic. It clarified everything. The objective hadn't changed. Only the methods. The hero in him, the boy who wanted to save everyone, died in that moment. It had to. In its place, something cold and ruthless took control. The shepherd. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer flat or robotic. It was sharp, hard, and resonant with an authority that shocked even himself. All units, listen to me now. The plan has changed. Phoenix, forget the junction box. I need a firewall. Sector 7 corridor, from floor to ceiling. Full power. I want a wall of blue flame hot enough to melt steel. Box them in. Do not hold back. There was a half-second of silence from Dobby's end, a flicker of what might have been surprise, or even respect. Copy that, Shepard. Finally, something interesting. Magician. Izuku snapped, using Compress's call sign. You are containment. Anyone who breaks through Dobby's firewall, you marble them. Security, heroes, doesn't matter. No hesitation. Clear a path. With pleasure, Compress replied, a hint of theatrical flair returning to his tone. Jester, start making clones. As many as you can handle. I need chaos. I need bodies. Flood the corridors, draw their fire. You got it, boss. This is a terrible idea. Sad man's parade, let's go. He saved the last order for the cause of all this chaos. The rage he felt was a white-hot furnace, but he channeled it, weaponized it. Decay. You wanted destruction? You have it. Get the Nightingale. It's on the central pedestal. The moment you have it, bring down the west wall. The entire wall. I want the whole leading straight to the outside. That's your new exit. Now you're speaking my language. Shigaraki crowed, the sound of his quirk activating again crackling over the calm. Izuku's fingers flew across his console, his mind a whirlwind of calculation. He was no longer just observing, he was directing a symphony of destruction. On his monitors he watched his commands become reality. A torrent of brilliant blue fire erupted in a main corridor, vaporizing a security drone and forcing a team of guards to scramble back, screaming as the heat blistered the paint on the walls. The flames were terrifying, absolute. Dobby was not holding back. Izuku heard faint, pain-filled cries over an open audio feed and forced himself not to listen. From another angle, he saw a pro-hero, a newcomer with a water-based quirk he recognized from the sports festival a few years back, try to douse the flames. As he broke through a weakened section of the firewall, a small blue marble shot out from the shadows and struck him in the chest. The hero vanished with a soft pop. Mr. Compress was ruthlessly efficient. Dozens of twice clones, all babbling nonsense, flooded the sublevels, engaging security and creating utter pandemonium. It was a perfect, chaotic smokescreen, and at the center of it all, Shigaraki stood in the ruined lab. He grabbed the Nightingale prototype, a sleek, black cylinder, and turned to the west wall. With a triumphant scream, he slammed his hand against the reinforced concrete. The wall didn't just crumble, it unraveled, turning to dust in a massive, expanding wave that blew outwards into the night air, revealing the manicured lawns of the Institute. Extraction point has changed, Kurogyri stated calmly from beside him, already anticipating the order. All units, fall back to the new exit. Izuku commanded, his voice hoarse. Kurogyri, prepare for immediate evac. He watched them retreat through the swirling dust and chaos. A frantic parade of villains silhouetted against Dobby's raging blue fire. They dove through the hole Shigaraki had made, where a warp gate was already shimmering into existence. One by one, their biometric signals vanished from his map. The last one out was Shigaraki. Before he stepped through the gate, he turned and looked directly at a security camera he had somehow left intact. He held up the Nightingale prototype, then gave the camera a lazy, five-fingered wave. Izuku knew the gesture wasn't for the heroes. It was for him. A taunt. A challenge. Then he was gone. The warp gate closed. The mission was over. Izuku slumped back in his chair, his entire body trembling. His headset was filled with the sounds of the aftermath, The crackle of Dobby's dying fire, the distant wail of more sirens, the panicked shouts of heroes trying to restore order. He saw medics rushing towards the firewall, stretchering away figures with severe, debilitating burns. He saw another hero trying to figure out how to release his comrades from Compress's marbles. They had succeeded. They had the tech. But the cost, the calculated cruelty of his own commands, it was a weight that threatened to crush him. He had ordered men to be burned. He had ordered heroes to be neutralized. He had unleashed Shigaraki's destruction. He tore the headset off and threw it onto the console. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. They returned through a warp gate into the command hub, not as a disciplined team, but as a chaotic mob high on adrenaline and victory. Toga was flushed and giggling, a fresh splash of blood on her cheek. Shigaraki swaggered to the center of the room and slammed the Nightingale prototype down on the holographic table with a triumphant crash. "See?" he gloated, his red eyes locking onto Izuku's. "That's how it's done. A little chaos makes everything better." Izuku said nothing. He couldn't form the words. He just stared at the cylinder, the prize they had won through his own monstrous orders. Before the tension could escalate further, All for One's voice filled the room, smooth and pleased. "Magnificent." All heads turned towards the speakers. "A flawless plan is a work of art, but it is a fragile thing," AFO mused. "A truly great commander is not one who creates a perfect plan, but one whose plan can survive contact with the enemy. Or, in this case," his voice held a hint of amusement, "a petulant subordinate. You showed remarkable adaptability, Commander. You turned Tamura's impulsive tantrum into a decisive, overwhelming victory. I am very impressed." The praise felt like a slap. It validated every horrible choice he had made. Then, the voice turned to Shigaraki. "And you, Tamura? You achieved the objective, but your methods were crude. An emotional outburst, not a strategic maneuver. You created a crisis that your commander had to solve for you. Observe him. Learn from him. A true leader does not let emotion dictate strategy. He masters it. And he uses it." Shigaraki's triumphant smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He had been simultaneously praised and humiliated. He looked at Izuku, and the hatred in his eyes had deepened into something far more patient. Far more lethal. Izuku barely registered it. His attention was stolen by a soft chime from his console. A new message. From AFO. Subject, your reward. His heart hammered against his ribs. With a trembling hand, he clicked it open. A video player popped up on his screen. He pressed play. The image was of Eri. She was sitting at the little table in her white room. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She was smiling. A small, tentative smile, but a genuine one. In front of her was a slice of a bright red apple, and a new box of crayons still in its pristine wrapper. She picked up the apple slice with her small fingers and took a bite, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She looked happy. Safe. Cared for. The video was only 10 seconds long. It played on a loop. Eri, smiling. Eri eating her apple. A reward. A reward for the screams he'd heard over the comms. A reward for the burned bodies of heroes. A reward for the terror he had unleashed. The juxtaposition was a physical blow. The victory, the praise, the successful mission, and this image of an innocent child's happiness, all bought and paid for with his soul. A wave of nausea so powerful it buckled his knees rose up from his stomach. He shoved himself away from the console, stumbling past the surprised Kurogyri, past Dabi's piercing, analytical gaze. He barely made it to a secluded corner of the base, a grimy alcove behind some storage crates, before he collapsed against the wall, his body convulsing. He retched, vomiting the tasteless nutrient paste onto the dusty concrete floor. It came up in harsh, burning waves, but it wasn't just the food he was expelling. It was the self-disgust. The horror, the crushing weight of his calculated cruelty. He was a villain. He had given the orders. He had hurt people to save one person. And he had succeeded. He wiped his mouth with the sleeve of his expensive suit, his body shaking uncontrollably. The victory hadn't tasted like ash. It had tasted like bile. And as he knelt there, Alone in the shadows of the villain's den, Izuku Midoriya finally understood. This was his life now. This was the price. And he would have to pay it again, and again, and again. The rain fell in a steady, melancholic drizzle, clinging to the black umbrellas like a second skin. It was a fittingly somber day, the sky a uniform, tear-streaked gray that seemed to weep for the world below. The entire student body of UA High School, along with its faculty and a somber assembly of pro-heroes, stood gathered in the main courtyard before a newly erected cenotaph. It was a simple, elegant pillar of white marble, stark against the damp green of the lawn. On it, etched in clean, solemn letters, was a name that felt impossibly wrong to see carved in stone: Izuku Midoriya. Below the name was a photograph, one taken just a few months ago. He was smiling, a bright sunburst of a grin, his green eyes sparkling with untainted optimism. He was in his gym uniform, a faint dusting of dirt on his cheek, a picture of boundless, heroic potential. A future stolen before it could truly begin. Standing at the podium, Toshinori Yagi looked like a man hollowed out from the inside. In his skeletal form, the black suit hung from his frame, making him appear even more fragile, more breakable. The rain plastered thin strands of his blonde hair to his skull. He held a piece of paper in a trembling hand, but he wasn't looking at it. His blue eyes, usually so full of life, were sunken, vacant pools of grief, fixed on the smiling face in the photograph. There are moments in life, he began, his voice a hoarse, cracking whisper that the microphone barely caught, when words fail. When the scope of a loss is so immense that language becomes a paltry, inadequate tool. He paused, swallowing hard. Izuku Midoriya was a light. A brilliant, blinding light of hope, of selflessness, of indomitable spirit. He saw the best in everyone, even when they could not see it in themselves. He possessed a drive not merely to be a hero, but to be the right kind of hero. One who saved people with a smile, who put the safety of others so far above his own that it was his very nature. He looked out at the sea of devastated young faces. At a sobbing Ochako Uraraka, held upright by a stoic but visibly trembling Tenya Ida. At a stone-faced Shoto Todoroki, his mismatched eyes glistening with unshed tears. The circumstances of his passing, a training accident, a quirk that grew too powerful, too fast, are a cruel irony, Toshinori continued, the lie tasting like poison in his mouth. The official story was clean, tragic, and utterly unbelievable to the man who knew the truth of one for all. He died reaching for a new level of strength. Reaching to become a better protector. He died, as he lived, in the pursuit of saving others. He couldn't go on. The prepared words about legacy and remembrance turned to ash on his tongue. All he could think about was the truth. His boy, his successor, the vessel of his sacred trust, was gone, and he, the former symbol of peace, had been helpless to stop it. He felt like a fraud, a failure whose greatest legacy was a gravestone for a child. He bowed his head, a broken man, and stepped away from the podium. A few rows back, Katsuki Bakugo stood ramrod straight, his hands jammed so deep into his pockets that the fabric strained at the seams. He wasn't crying. His face was a thunderous mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He glared at the photograph, at Deku's stupid, smiling face, and his teeth were clenched so tightly his jaw ached. Accident my ass, he thought, the words a silent scream in his mind. You don't just miscalculate and vanish off the face of the earth, you damn nerd. It's not possible. It was denial, but it was also a warrior's intuition. Deku, the obsessive, meticulous, frustratingly careful Deku, did not make mistakes like that. He analyzed, he muttered, he planned for every conceivable outcome. To Bakugo, this neat, tidy story felt like a lie. And if it was a lie, that meant something else had happened. Something had taken him, and that was a thought Bakugo couldn't handle, because it implied an enemy he couldn't see, a fight he couldn't win. So he channeled his grief and fear into the only emotion he knew how to wield, rage. He would get stronger. Strong enough to incinerate anyone or anything that could have done this. It was the only way he could honor the memory of the one person he had ever truly considered his rival. Near the edge of the crowd, Shota Aizawa stood with his arms crossed, his gaze hooded and intense. He was a pillar of stillness in the swirling vortex of sorrow. He listened to Nizu's eulogy, to Toshinori's broken words, and his suspicion coalesced into a cold, hard certainty. The official report from the Hero Public Safety Commission was too clean. The blast radius was inconsistent with Midoriya's known output with One for All. The lack of any significant biological remains, chalked up to the intensity of the energy release, was too convenient. Aizawa was a man who lived in a world of logic, facts, and ugly truths. And the truth was, this felt like an abduction. A professional, high-level extraction made to look like an accident. But who? And why? His mind sifted through the possibilities, each one more chilling than the last. His student wasn't dead. He refused to believe it until he saw irrefutable proof, and that meant Izuku Midoriya was out there somewhere, a prisoner. Aizawa's expression didn't change, but a new, grim resolve settled in his heart. The hunt was on. Miles away, in the cold, sterile darkness of the League's command hub, Izuku Midoriya watched it all. All for One had made sure of it. The memorial service was broadcast on the main screen in high definition, the audio piped directly into the room's speakers. It was a mandatory viewing. A lesson. Izuku stood before the screen, motionless, a ghost in his own funeral. He watched All Might, his mentor, his idol, break down in a way he had never seen before, and felt a pain so sharp it was like a physical blade twisting in his gut. He saw Uraraka's tear-streaked face, her body shaking with sobs, and his own tears threatened to fall. He saw Ida, Todoroki, Tsuyu, Kirishima, all of his friends, his precious, irreplaceable friends, drowning in a sea of grief that he had caused. He saw Bakugo's rage, and understood it for what it was, a desperate, roaring denial. And he saw Aizawa-sensei's cold, analytical stare and felt a flicker of pure terror. His teacher didn't believe it. He was looking for him. It was a uniquely exquisite form of torture. He was forced to witness the full measure of the love and hope people had for him. At the exact moment, he was being forced to betray it. Every tear shed for Izuku Midoriya was a hammer blow against the crumbling foundations of his soul. He could feel the eyes of the League on him. Toga was watching with rapt fascination, her head tilted. Shigaraki was observing him with a sneer, enjoying his torment. Dabi's gaze was the most intense, a silent, piercing probe searching for a crack in his facade. He couldn't break. He couldn't cry. He couldn't show them the screaming, clawing agony that was tearing him apart from the inside. To show that pain would be to show them the hero was still alive. It would be a weakness they would exploit. It would be a weakness that could get Eri killed. So he did the only thing he could. He built a wall. As he watched his own memorial, as he listened to the heartfelt eulogies, he began a quiet, desperate process of psychological self-destruction. He took the entity known as Izuku Midoriya, the hopeful boy, the crying fanboy, the aspiring hero, the friend, and he locked it away in a deep, dark corner of his mind. He walled it off, brick by painful brick. Izuku Midoriya is dead, he told himself, the thought a cold, flat mantra. They are grieving for a memory. A ghost. He forced himself to analyze the scene with cold detachment. All Might's emotional state renders him unstable. A potential vulnerability. Uraraka's grief is profound. She will be off active duty for a time. Bakugo's anger makes him predictable. Aizawa's suspicion is a threat. It must be monitored. He was turning his greatest strength, his empathy, into a weapon against himself. He was dissecting his own heart with the cold precision of a surgeon. By the time the broadcast ended and the screen went black, something inside him had fundamentally changed. The boy who had been forced into a black suit was gone. In his place stood the persona he was crafting to survive. He was Shepard. Cold. Calculating. Detached. A machine for strategy. A leader of monsters. A ghost who had just finished watching his own burial. He turned from the dark screen, his face a perfect blank mask. He walked to his console, sat down, and pulled up the data from the Itokawa raid. There was work to do. Izuku Midoriya was allowed to grieve. Shepard was not. The days bled into weeks. Life in the bunker settled into a grim routine. Shepard, he refused to think of himself by any other name, became a creature of pure function. He would rise in his small, concrete cell, consume the tasteless nutrient paste, and proceed directly to his console in the command hub. There he would remain for 16 to 18 hours a day, a silent, brooding fixture in the corner of the room. His notebooks, once filled with heroic analysis, were now grim tomes of villainy. He didn't just plan missions. He studied the enemy. He studied his own forces. He studied the very philosophy of what he was being forced to do. He acquired digital copies of books from AFO's vast, dark library: Sun Tzu's The Art of War, Clausewitz's On War, Machiavelli's The Prince. He devoured historical accounts of asymmetric warfare, terrorist cell structures, and counterintelligence operations. He was re-educating himself, poisoning the well of his heroic knowledge with the grim pragmatism of conflict. His new analysis was terrifyingly insightful. Toga Himiko, Viper high-value asset for infiltration and assassination. Motivation, emotional obsession, a twisted form of affection. To control, manipulate the target of her obsession. Highly volatile, best utilized in short, high-impact operations. Avoid long-term deep cover. Psychological instability is a liability. Dobby, Phoenix immense destructive power. High strategic intelligence. Motivation, unknown, but appears to be a deeply personal vendetta against the hero system, specifically Endeavor. Cynical and insubordinate, but respects power and intellect. Control through logic and results, not authority. The most dangerous member, not for his power, but for his perceptiveness. A potential threat to command integrity. Shigaraki Tamura, decay the primary weapon and the primary liability. A symbol of chaos. Quirk is apocalyptic. Motivation, pure, nihilistic destruction. Seeks validation from master. His emotional state is a tactical lever. He can be aimed, but not truly controlled. To use him effectively is to treat him like a natural disaster, point him at the target, and be prepared for extensive collateral damage. His jealousy towards Shepard is a critical vulnerability for the entire organization. He became a ghost to the League as well. He rarely spoke. Orders were issued through encrypted text messages sent directly to their personal devices or the main hub screen. He managed supply lines, upgraded their security protocols, and established contingency plans and escape routes for every conceivable scenario. He was turning the League from a chaotic street gang into a sophisticated paramilitary organization, and he did it all from the silent isolation of his corner, his face illuminated by the cold glow of the monitor. His efforts did not go unnoticed. He could feel a shift in the way the others treated him. The open hostility began to correlate with a grudging, fearful respect. He was effective. His plans worked. Under his cold, detached command, they had successfully executed 2 more minor operations, a data heist from a hero support company and the disruption of a major HPSC supply chain, both with ruthless efficiency and no losses. But this new respect did not bring him peace. It only deepened his self-loathing. He was becoming good at this. The thought made him sick. One night, long after the others had retired to their quarters, Izuku, Shepard, was still at his post. The command hub was silent save for the low hum of the servers. He was analyzing hero response patterns to the supply chain raid, cross-referencing them with patrol schedules he had stolen in the data heist. It was a complex, multi-layered puzzle, and for a few fleeting moments, he could almost lose himself in the pure logic of it, forgetting the monstrous purpose behind his work. You never sleep, do you, Izuku-kun? The voice, a sweet, musical whisper right behind him, made him jolt. He spun his chair around. Toga was standing there, barefoot, her schoolgirl uniform looking absurd in the high-tech gloom. She held one of her knives, idly tracing patterns on her own palm with the flat of the blade. Her golden eyes were wide and curious, gleaming in the monitor's light. He said nothing. He simply stared at her, his face an emotionless mask. He ran a threat assessment in his head. Proximity, too close. Weapon in hand? Intent, unknown, likely psychological probing. It's so quiet in your head, isn't it? She mused, taking a small step closer. She tilted her head. It used to be so noisy. I could almost hear it when we fought at the training camp. All that I have to save them. I have to win. Whir. Like a little engine. But now, it's just quiet. Cold. She shivered, a theatrical gesture of delight. I like it. It's lonely. Lonely is beautiful. Broken things are the most beautiful of all. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of ice. He had to maintain control. He couldn't let her in. He couldn't let her see the screaming boy behind the mask. He turned back to his console. Your presence here is unscheduled and inefficient, he stated, his voice a flat, robotic monotone. Return to your quarters. Toga giggled, a sound like tiny, breaking glass. So formal. So commanding. But you're still Izuku-kun under there, aren't you? The boy who bleeds so pretty. She took another step, leaning over his shoulder to look at his screen. Her breath was warm on his neck. All these numbers and lines. Does it make you feel powerful? Does it make you forget? Forget what? He asked, his voice dangerously low. He didn't move a muscle. Toga whispered, her voice dropping. The round-faced girl. The one you're always trying to protect. Ochako-chan. I bet she cried so much when you died. Do you ever think about her? Does it make you sad? It was a direct hit. A precision strike to the most vulnerable part of his soul. For a single, infinitesimal moment, the mask slipped, the cold detachment faltered, and a wave of pure, unadulterated agony washed over his face. His jaw clenched. His eyes, reflected in the dark screen, lost their emptiness and flooded with a depth of pain that was terrible to behold. The hero, the boy, the friend, he was there, drowning in plain sight. It lasted only a second. Then the walls slammed back into place. The emotion vanished, replaced by an even deeper, more profound emptiness. But it was too late. She had seen it. Toga gasped, a soft, ecstatic sound. Her eyes were wide with a kind of crazed reverence. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling, as if to touch his face. There you are, she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. I saw you. Oh, Izuku-kun. You're even more beautiful than I imagined. He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He just sat there, a statue of cold fury, while she reveled in the wound she had exposed. She hadn't broken him, she had validated her own twisted fantasy, that somewhere inside the monster, the broken hero was still screaming. And to her, that was the most romantic thing in the world. From the deep shadows near the main entrance, Dalby watched the entire exchange. He had been on his way to get a drink of water, moving with his usual predatory silence, and had stopped when he saw Toga approach the commander. He had seen it too, that fleeting, momentary flicker of raw, human pain. It wasn't beautiful to him. It wasn't romantic. It was a tell. Dalby had grown up in a world of lies, masks, and hidden agendas. He was a connoisseur of deceit. And the performance he was watching from Izuku Midoriya was one of the most elaborate he had ever seen. The coldness, the detachment, the sudden adoption of a villain's mindset, it was all too clean, too absolute. People didn't just change like that. They didn't just flip a switch from pure-hearted hero to ruthless strategist overnight. Shigaraki was too blinded by jealousy to see it. Toga was too obsessed with her own twisted narrative. The others were too simple or too cowed by AFO's authority. But Dalby saw it. He saw the lie, and that flicker of pain he just witnessed was the first real clue to the truth. Midoriya wasn't a convert. He was a hostage. Not a physical one, perhaps, but a psychological one. The master hadn't recruited a new commander. He had broken a hero and was wearing his skin like a puppet. The question was how. What leverage did the master have that was so powerful it could force the symbol of peace's chosen successor to lead his worst enemies? Dalby melted back into the shadows, his mind whirring. A new objective began to form, separate from his own fiery ambitions. He would watch the shepherd. He would find the seams in his performance. He would discover the nature of his leash. Not out of any sense of altruism, but for a far more practical reason. A leader who could be blackmailed was a leader with a weakness, and in the world Dalby inhabited, weakness was a weapon to be exploited by those clever enough to find it. The next day, Izuku was reviewing the after-action reports from the Itokawa raid. It was a form of self-flagellation. He forced himself to read the official hero debriefings, which Hawks had leaked through channels AFO had access to. He read the medical reports of the guards injured by Dobby's firewall, third-degree burns, months of recovery, permanent scarring. He read the psychological evaluations of the heroes trapped in Compress's marbles, the lingering trauma of being conscious but paralyzed in a tiny, dark prison. He absorbed it all, letting the guilt wash over him in cold, punishing waves. This was his work. His legacy. A news broadcast began to play on a side monitor, one he always kept tuned to a major public news network. It was a follow-up piece on the raid. The anchor spoke in grave tones about the new face of villainy, a league that was no longer just chaotic, but ruthlessly intelligent. They called their unknown new leader the Architect of Fear. The camera cut to footage from outside the ravaged institute the morning after the attack. Police lines, emergency vehicles, and a crowd of horrified onlookers. The camera panned across the faces in the crowd, a montage of public fear and anxiety. And then he saw her. Standing just behind a police barricade was Ochako Uraraka. Her face was pale, her knuckles white where she gripped the strap of her shoulder bag. The devastating, all-consuming grief from the memorial was gone. In its place was something new. Something harder. Her brow was furrowed, not with sadness, but with a fierce, burning resolve. Her eyes were fixed on the gaping hole in the side of the building, the hole his plan had created, and they shone with a mixture of sorrow, fear, and a steely, righteous anger. She was not just a grieving friend anymore. She was a hero looking at the work of an enemy she now swore to defeat. He had done this. He had taken the soft, warm light of his friend and, through his own actions, had forged it into the hard glare of a warrior. He was creating the very heroes who would one day stand against him. His fist, resting on the console, clenched so tightly the knuckles turned white. The name the news had given him, the Architect of Fear, felt inadequate. The name he had given himself felt more fitting, more honest. Shepherd. A shepherd guides his flock. He protects them. He leads them. But he also leads them to the slaughter. He was guiding the League, but he was also guiding his friends, the heroes, onto a path of conflict and pain. He was the architect of their future suffering as much as the League's victories. The name was not a role anymore. It was not a mask. It was a brand, seared onto his very soul. A permanent mark of the monster he had to be to save one innocent life. He looked from Uraraka's determined face on the screen back to his own reflection in the dark monitor. The eyes that stared back at him were hollow, empty, and utterly resolved. The ghost of Izuku Midoriya finally faded completely, leaving only the cold, hard silhouette of the shepherd, ready for his next command. The air in the command hub was thick with a tension that had been building for weeks. It was a low-pressure system of resentment and jealousy, and at its eye was Tamura Shigaraki. Every successful mission, every word of praise from the master directed at the silent commander in the corner, was another grain of salt ground into the festering wound of his pride. He was the successor, the symbol of the new age, the inheritor of all for one's will. Yet he was being treated like a student, forced to take orders from a hero brat masquerading in a black suit. The final straw came during the briefing for their next operation. The target was a convoy transporting advanced polymer armor plates developed for the next generation of hero costumes. The material was lightweight, durable, and resistant to both extreme heat and kinetic force, a perfect upgrade for the League's frontline combatants. Shepard, as always, had devised a plan that was a masterpiece of cold, brutal efficiency. It was an ambush set in a narrow underpass on the city's industrial outskirts. It involved precise timing, the use of Kurogiri's warp gates to isolate the lead and rear escort vehicles, and a swift, non-lethal strike to disable the central transport truck. The objective was asset acquisition with minimal engagement and a clean getaway. It was logical. It was smart, and Shigaraki hated it. He had been scratching his neck throughout the entire presentation, his nails leaving angry red wheals on his already ravaged skin. The moment Shepard finished speaking, the scratching stopped. The silence was more alarming than the sound had been. "No," Shigaraki said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. He pushed himself off his stool, his red eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "No more of this. No more sneaking around in the dark like pathetic rats." He stalked to the center of the room, his movements jerky and predatory. He pointed a trembling, four-fingered hand at Shepard, who remained impassive at his console. I'm sick of your clean plans, your efficient little games. This isn't a game of chess, Commander. This is a war against a society that disgusts me. And in war, you don't sneak. You don't hide. You burn it all to the ground. Toga watched with wide, excited eyes. Spinner shifted his weight, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Compress sighed theatrically, as if settling in for a familiar performance. Dalby, leaning against his customary wall, crossed his arms, a faint, cruel smirk playing on his lips. He had been waiting for this. Shepard slowly turned his chair to face him. His face was a blank canvas, his eyes holding a cold, dead stillness. Your emotional outburst is irrelevant, he stated, his voice the flat monotone of a machine. The plan is optimized for a 97.4% success rate with a 99% survival probability for all League assets. Any deviation increases risk and decreases the likelihood of achieving the primary objective. To hell with your percentages! Shigaraki shrieked, spit flying from his lips. You're a coward! You still think like a hero. You're afraid to get your hands dirty, to make them scream. You're afraid to show them what real power looks like. He took another step forward. Sensei might be blind to it, but I'm not. You're weak. You're holding us back. And I will not be led by a weakling. This was it. The direct challenge. The gauntlet thrown down in front of the entire League. Authority, once questioned, is easily broken. Shepard knew he couldn't back down. More importantly, he knew he couldn't fight. Not physically. A direct confrontation was a lose-lose scenario. If he used one for all, even defensively, he would reveal the hero still lurking inside. It would shatter the fragile persona he had so carefully constructed. The lie would be exposed, and the consequences for Eri would be immediate and catastrophic. If he didn't fight back, Shigaraki would tear him apart, and he would be useless to All for One, again leading to dire consequences for Eri. He was trapped. A physical confrontation was unwinnable. But All for One had chosen him for his mind, not his muscle. And so, Shepard chose a different battlefield. He rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate and calm. He did not raise his fists. He did not activate his quirk. He simply met Shigaraki's crazed, hate-filled glare with his own unnervingly empty one. You believe my methods are weak, Shepard said, his voice calm, yet carrying an edge of cold steel that cut through Shigaraki's tirade. You believe your path of mindless destruction is superior, a fascinating hypothesis. It deserves to be tested. Shigaraki faltered, his momentum broken by the unexpected response. What are you talking about? A challenge, Shepard replied. He gestured to the holographic table. But not a duel of fists. That is a crude and imprecise measure of a leader's worth. Our value to the master is not in our ability to destroy a single opponent, but in our ability to outthink an entire system. I accept your challenge on those terms. A battle of wits. A flicker of confusion crossed Shigaraki's face, quickly replaced by a sneer. You want to play a game? I'll decay the board and you with it. Not a game. A war simulation, Shepard clarified. He walked to the main table, his back to Shigaraki in a move of either supreme confidence or utter foolishness. He keyed a few commands into the interface. The blueprint of the underpass vanished, replaced by a detailed, three-dimensional schematic of their own base. This very command hub and the surrounding network of corridors and living quarters. A series of red icons, representing their own forces, blinked within the structure. The scenario is this, Shepard announced, his voice echoing slightly in the tense room. A hero raid. Now. A combined force led by Endeavor, Hawks, and Best Jeanist has discovered our location. Their primary objective is the capture or elimination of all League members. Their secondary objective is the capture of me, the League's commander. They are breaching the perimeter at 3 entry points, here, here, and here. He highlighted 3 vulnerable points in their defense grid that he himself had identified weeks ago. He turned, his cold eyes sweeping over the assembled villains before finally landing on Shigaraki. You claim to be the superior leader. Prove it. Formulate a defense. Give your orders. How do you, Commander Shigaraki, ensure our survival and defeat the top 3 heroes in Japan. The challenge hung in the air, audacious and absolute. Shepard had just handed Shigaraki the reins in a crisis of his own making. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. He had reframed the conflict from a playground brawl to a test of leadership, forcing Shigaraki to engage on his terms, on his chosen battlefield. Shigaraki stared, momentarily stunned. Then a slow, ugly grin spread across his face. This he could do. This was his element. Destruction. Chaos. Fine, he spat. You want my plan? Here's my plan. He shoved Shepard aside and stabbed a finger at the holographic map. It's simple. We don't defend. We attack. I'll take Dabi and we'll meet Endeavor at the main entrance. I'll decay his flames, and Dabi will burn that fraud to a crisp. It's what he's always wanted, isn't it? He glanced at Dabi, who simply watched, his expression unreadable. Twice. Shigaraki barked, getting into his role with relish. You start making clones. An army of them. They'll flood the northern corridor and bog down that feathered traitor, Hawks. Overwhelm him with numbers. Compress, you and Spinner go with them. Capture anyone who gets through. And what about Best Jeanist? Mr. Compress inquired, a hint of skepticism in his voice. I'll take care of him myself, Shigaraki declared, his eyes gleaming with manic energy. After we're done with Endeavor, I'll collapse the entire West Wing on top of him. Bury him under tons of our own base. We'll use the chaos to escape through the emergency exit. It's a perfect plan. All-out war. No survivors. We'll send a message that no one will ever forget, he finished, panting slightly, high on his own vision of apocalyptic victory. He looked around the room, seeking validation. Toga looked thrilled at the prospect of such carnage. Twice was already vibrating with excitement. Spinner seemed hesitant but willing. Shigaraki turned back to Shepard with a triumphant sneer. See? That's leadership. That's a real plan. Not your cowardly sneaking around. Now, what do you have to say to that, Commander? Shepard had remained silent throughout the entire tirade, his hands clasped behind his back. He had simply watched, his expression unchanged. Now, he took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving Shigaraki's. I say your plan is strategically bankrupt, he said, his voice quiet but carrying the finality of a judge's sentence. And it would result in the death or capture of every single person in this room. Shigaraki's face contorted with rage. What did you just? Allow me to dissect it for you, Shepard interrupted, cutting him off with surgical precision. He turned to the holographic map, and his analysis began. It was not an argument, it was a deconstruction. Point 1. Your primary assault on Endeavor. His finger tapped the main entrance icon. You propose a two-man team against the number 1 hero, a man whose control over his flames allows for both wide-area attacks and precision strikes. Your decay quirk requires proximity. To get close enough to Endeavor, you would have to bypass his flame wall. Dabi's fire, while powerful, is not superior to Endeavor's in either heat or control. Best case scenario, you engage in a prolonged battle, a battle of attrition. This engagement would last approximately 3 minutes and 20 seconds before Endeavor identifies Dabi's weakness, his low resistance to his own flames, and exploits it, incapacitating him. You would then be alone, Shigaraki. Dabi, who had been watching with detached amusement, suddenly went rigid. His smirk vanished. Shepard had just voiced a weakness Dabi kept carefully hidden, a secret shame he thought no one else knew. His turquoise eyes narrowed, focusing on Shepard with a new, dangerous intensity. Shepard didn't even glance at him. He continued his cold dissection. Point 2. Your deployment of Twice against Hawks. You propose flooding a single corridor. Hawks' Fierce Wings quirk allows for exceptional aerial mobility and multi-vector attacks. He would not engage your clones on the ground. He would remain airborne, using the corridor's ceiling as a vantage point, and methodically eliminate your clones from a distance with his high-velocity feathers. He would treat your army as a target-rich environment, a simple matter of pest control. He would neutralize your force in under 90 seconds and proceed unimpeded. Twice excited muttering ceased. He stared at the hologram, a look of horrified realization on his face. He's right. That chicken bastard would totally do that. Point 3. Shepard's voice was relentless, a jackhammer chipping away at Shigaraki's bravado. Your plan for best genist. You propose collapsing the West Wing. A bold move. However, you have failed to account for best genist's quirk, Fiber Master. He is the single best hero in Japan for structural reinforcement and rescue operations. Collapsing the ceiling on him would not kill him. It would merely give him more material to work with. He would use his quirk to weave the debris into a protective cocoon, then turn the very structure of our base against us, using carbon fiber from the concrete to restrain and capture anyone nearby. You wouldn't be burying him. You would be handing him the weapon to defeat you. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the now silent room. And your final, critical error. You have no contingency for your own escape. You assume you can simply use the chaos. But you have created a scenario with 3 of the world's most powerful heroes actively hunting you in a collapsing, burning structure of your own making. Your perfect plan ensures that we are trapped, outmaneuvered, and systematically dismantled. Your leadership would have led us not to victory, but to annihilation. It is emotional, short-sighted, and pathetically predictable, he finished. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the low hum of the servers. Shigaraki stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and sputtering rage. He had been so proud of his plan, so sure of its chaotic brilliance. And this hero, had taken it apart piece by piece, like a child's toy, and shown everyone how cheap and broken it was. He hadn't just been proven wrong. He had been humiliated, his strategic incompetence laid bare for all to see. So, Shigaraki finally choked out, his voice trembling with a mixture of shame and fury. You're so smart. What's your plan, then? What would you do, O great and powerful Shepard? Shepard's expression remained unchanged. He turned back to the holographic table. My plan is not about victory. In this scenario, victory is a statistical impossibility. My plan is about survival. It is about rendering the hero's strength irrelevant. The red icons on the map blinked. My plan has one objective: escape. Not with a fight, but with a whisper. Phase 1. Misdirection and data denial. He highlighted the base's main server room. The moment the raid is confirmed, I would initiate a full data purge of our primary and secondary servers. Simultaneously, I would trigger a logic bomb in the electrical grid, frying every console and monitor in this room. We would plunge the heroes into darkness, both literal and informational. They would have breached our walls, but they would be blind, with no access to our schematics, security feeds, or intelligence. He then highlighted a series of explosive charges he had secretly catalogued during his first week. Phase 2. Strategic demolition. Controlled charges would be detonated here, and here. He indicated 3 non-critical structural supports far from their current position. These are not meant to kill. They are meant to alter the battlefield. They would seal the most direct routes to our location, forcing the hero teams to reroute, separating them and slowing their advance. It creates confusion and buys us time. Phase 3. The shell game. He zoomed in on their position. Twice, you would create only 3 clones. Not an army. 3 perfect copies of me. Kurogiri would then warp each clone, along with 1 other League member, to 3 separate, pre-designated fallback points several kilometers from here. Dabi with 1. Compress and Spinner with another, Toga with the 3rd. You, Shigaraki, would come with me, the real Shepard. He looked around the room. The hero's secondary objective is my capture. They will waste precious time and resources chasing ghosts, attempting to determine which of the 4 commanders is the genuine article. By the time they realize their error, the primary asset, the real command structure, will be gone. Kurogiri's final warp would take us, me and Shigaraki, to a deep-level safe house whose existence is known only to myself and the Master. We would abandon this base and everything in it. We would lose the battle for this piece of ground, but we would survive to fight another day, our command structure intact, our forces scattered but safe. We would lose the battle, but we would not lose the war. He fell silent. His plan was the complete antithesis of Shigaraki's. It was quiet, defensive, and borderline cowardly. It was about retreat, not glory. But it was also undeniably, brilliantly effective. It didn't defeat the hero's strength, it simply made it irrelevant. No one spoke. The contrast between the two plans was stark and undeniable. Shigaraki's was a suicidal blaze of glory. Shepard's was a cold, calculated escape. One was the plan of a petulant child throwing a tantrum. The other was the plan of a seasoned general saving his army. Shigaraki stared at the hologram, at the elegant, ruthless logic of Shepard's strategy. He saw the faces of his comrades. Toga's thrill had faded, replaced by thoughtful consideration. Spinner looked openly impressed. Even Twice was nodding slowly. That's actually really smart. We'd all die. But smart. And Dobby. Dobby was looking at Shepard with an expression he had never worn before. It was a sliver, just a tiny sliver, of something that looked like grudging respect. He had seen Shepard's hidden weakness, but he had also just witnessed his terrifying strength. This boy wasn't just a puppet. He was a strategic genius, capable of turning any situation, even open rebellion, to his advantage. Shigaraki felt the last of his authority, the last of his pride, crumble to dust. He had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and utterly defeated. And he had done it to himself. He let out a choked, half-strangled sound, a mixture of a sob and a snarl. He turned and, without another word, stormed out of the command hub, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The rabid dog had not been beaten into submission. It had been tamed by a logic so cold and absolute it had frozen the fire in its heart. Shepard watched him go, his face still a mask of perfect calm. Inside, however, Izuku Midoriya was shaking. The gamble had worked. He had asserted his authority not with power, but with intellect. He had survived. Eri was safe. Dobby pushed himself off the wall and walked slowly towards the holographic table. He stopped next to Shepard, his turquoise eyes boring into the side of his head. Shepard did not turn to look at him. "You're either the smartest hero I've ever met," Dobby said, his voice a low, smoky murmur, "or the most terrifying villain." Shepard finally turned his head, his empty eyes meeting Dobby's piercing gaze. "Does it matter?" he replied, his voice a dead whisper, "as long as we win?" Dobby held his gaze for a long moment, then a slow, dangerous smile spread across his scarred face. He had his answer. It didn't matter what Shepard was. What mattered was what he could do, and Dobby was beginning to think that following this broken boy might just lead him to the fiery reckoning he so desperately craved. He had wanted to find a weakness to exploit, but he may have just found a weapon to aim.